I witnessed suffering that was far deeper than my own. People had lost entire families, they'd lost homes. I came upon a diary written by a schoolgirl in the Swat Valley. It had been taken over by the Taliban. They began to blow up girls' schools, and in January 2009 declared an all-out ban on female education, and I reached out. I would end up crossing paths with Malala when she was 11 years old. But when Malala asked me to co-found the Malala Fund, I was a year out of college, and I had no idea if this would actually work. As a Pakistani American now, I hadn't seen my culture represented by mainstream brands. Do we believe that we deserve to have real meaning and purpose in our lives?
Shiza Shahid is the co-founder of kitchenware and cookware system brand Our Place, which has taken the world by storm and is one of the only direct-to-consumer startups to grow into a 9-figure business in just the first 17 months of business. Now, Shiza grew up in Pakistan, where home cooking was at the forefront of her culture, and there are many dishes that have shaped the life she leads. Launching Our Place in 2019, Shiza's vision is to disrupt the market and to celebrate the power of cooking and storytelling with ethically made and toxin-free stylish cookware. It's even gained celebrity collaborations with Selena Gomez, and it's been widely loved and recognised by celebrities including the Beckhams, Paris Hilton, Lizzo, Cameron Diaz, and even the wonderful Oprah Winfrey. And prior to launching Our Place, Shiza also founded and was CEO of the Malala Fund, following the shooting of Malala Yousafzai, and was one of Time magazine's 30 under 30 world changers. She's an entrepreneur, she's an activist, and she's a women's rights advocate and an investor. And now it's time to go behind the scenes, back to the beginning, as we explore how Shiza created such an iconic brand while simultaneously driving sustainable change for the world. Well, Shiza, it's lovely to have you on the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Shiza, I know you just filled in the graph of your life. We did a bit of an exercise, and the way I want to start today really is I want to go right back to the beginning of your life, if I can. And I want to ask you, what is the earliest memory that you have in your life?
Ooh, you know, it's interesting about early memories because I feel like they have to be intense to kind of stick. So I remember breaking a glass for the first time, just being really young and breaking a glass and feeling really scared and just crying, and going to my mother and having her reassure me. You know, I remember also actually when I was about 3 years old, we moved to Plymouth in the UK for a year. My father worked in the Pakistani Navy and was posted there. And I have so many happy memories of that time. But I also remember for the first time, Plymouth, of course, is a small town, just feeling different for the first time and having this sense of registering that, you know, I look different, I am from a different culture, and that maybe that wasn't perceived as good by others. And so just these intense moments of feeling either maybe fear or lack of belonging. Not to say that my childhood wasn't happy, it was, but I think those moments kind of stick out.
It's so interesting, and later I'm going to come on to that because it's something I want to ask you about, all the amazing work you've done and around fear. We'll come on to that a little bit later. And so interesting then, so you're in Plymouth, and then I also want to look at your life growing up then back in Pakistan. So you were in Plymouth for how long?
Just a year.
Just a year. And then you go back to Pakistan, and just talk to me about what was life like growing up in Pakistan?
Life in Pakistan was beautiful in many ways. My parents gave us a safe and loving home. They worked hard to give us the very best education that they could afford. They didn't come from much, but they made the radical decision that no matter the cost, no matter the opposition, they would put their children in the very best schools in the country and give them the opportunity to live their dreams. So I was fortunate. I got to grow up in a safe and loving home, have a relatively good education. But I was also growing up in Pakistan at a time when there was rising violence, rising terrorism. It was a post 9/11 world. I was growing up in the capital city. There were terrorist attacks very close to my home. And I think as a young person, I really wanted to understand what was going on in the world around me and try and make a difference. And so I did the only thing I could think of. I began showing up at the doors of nonprofits and asking them to let me volunteer. And so from a young age, I was working first in a women's prison, then in microfinance and microenterprise, then in a relief camp for people who'd been impacted by the earthquake in 2005 in Pakistan and Kashmir. And that work was difficult, but it was also filled with a tremendous amount of meaning and purpose. So I think as I look back on my childhood and my adolescence, I think the word that most comes to mind is a sense of meaning and purpose.
And I read that, Shiza, about, at the age of 14, I know it was a dear friend of yours who at the time introduced you to the prisons, and you were helping where women had been convicted of crimes. I mean, this is a 14-year-old. So people watching this, I'm getting them to think back to when they were 14, probably at school, probably sometimes messing around at the back of the class or being, a good student. But at 14, you were going to school. And then after school and on weekends, were you then showing up at the prison to help? And what were you doing in the prison? Tell me about your friend who introduced you.
Well, the women's prison I went to in my summer holidays. So that was my internship of sorts. I would, and I helped carry medical supplies into the women's prison, and really just got exposed to life in a different way. From there, I began volunteering with an organization that provided microloans to women along with micro-enterprise training. And, I was young, I didn't have many skills, but I could write reasonably well. So I would interview women who had received loans, and I would write the case studies of that work to see, had it been impactful, had they been able to take that training, take that funding, and actually start to chart a course out of poverty for themselves and their families. And sort of, you more often than not would find that, when you empower women to earn, they lift their entire communities out of poverty. About 90% of every dollar that a woman earns, she invests back into her family and community. It's typically 30 to 40% for men. So growing up, being exposed to the power of women to change their communities made me extremely passionate about supporting women's rights, girls' education, and economic empowerment for women.
When you were going to the prisons then, because it was women in the prisons, and we're going to touch on this a little bit later as well about people who are wrongly convicted, people's rights are not equal. Were those women in the prison, I have to ask, were they wrongly convicted? Should they not have been there? And hence it fueled you to help, or just to understand who was in there?
I wouldn't know. But I think I think that what I will say is the line between someone who ends up in a life like ours and someone who ends up in a life like theirs, a lot of it is often luck and destiny and privilege and having safety, having food, having education, having community. And I think that we often look at folks who end up in places like that and think they're very different from us, but they're not. And I think that the thing that really stayed with me, I was very young at the time, but what stayed with me was the number of children. So in Pakistan, in that specific prison, women were allowed to have their children with them up to a certain age. And so, these were children born in prison, growing up in prison. And it just was this juxtaposition, this place that in some respects you would think of as dark, in other respects had light and laughter and love and joy. And so really just taught me to see places and situations and people with a lot more nuance.
Yeah. It's beautiful that you at such a young age were going in and taking light to people who probably didn't have much hope, but you were bringing that in. And you mentioned there food and community and all these important things and safety. But then I know things changed again on the 8th of October in 2005, when you just touched on the earthquake that killed almost 85,000 people in Kashmir. Now, I just want you to kind of bring to life, I know this personally affected you for many different reasons and what happened then, but also whether that moment and that catastrophe then almost ignited a further determination in an already young Shiza's mind that I'm going to drive change.
Yeah, it absolutely did. You know, I think, as you mentioned, the earthquake was deeply, deeply traumatic for many. Over, 85,000 is sort of the official figure, but in tragedies like this, it's often a lot higher. Over 1 million were displaced. Over 100,000 were injured. And it was also something that affected me personally. My best friend died in that earthquake. And for me, what I, there was, of course, a lot of grief, but also in the aftermath of that, the way that I processed that grief was I began showing up at an earthquake relief camp in my city. So people who had been impacted, specifically in Kashmir, came down to camps around the country. And this was one specific camp that was about a 20-minute drive from my home. And so every day I would go to this camp and spend time with children, spend time with girls, spend time with women. And that meant everything from playing games to passing out blankets to, taking women to the doctor if they needed to go to the hospital nearby. And it was one of the most transformative experiences of my life. For one, it put my own grief in context because, in my school and amongst my friends, I felt like I was the only one who had experienced this. But when I went into the camp, I witnessed suffering that was far deeper than my own. People had lost entire families, they'd lost homes. And even in the midst of that tragedy, were filled with so much compassion and love and resilience. But also it gave me a deep sense of purpose. And Viktor Frankl famously said, man can overcome anyhow if you have a why, right? And for me, being able to give back, to feel a sense of contributing, of maybe easing someone's suffering even just a little bit, that feeling became incredibly important to getting through that time period. But even since then, I think it's something that I see as integral to my life, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. I think it is necessary for survival. And I'll always look back at that time as just being grateful that I was able to contribite in some way.
And how old were you then in 2005 when you were through the camp and supporting
I was about 15, 16, yeah.
So 14, you're supporting in the prison. 15, 16, you're then supporting other people and going through the grief of losing a best friend. You mentioned then perspective, which has helped me a lot, kind of seeing the other people and what they'd gone through. But you also, I'm sure, doing very well at school right now, because if I'm not wrong, then a couple of years later, you then were given a full scholarship and you moved to the US to Stanford. And so I just kind of want to just go through this age of being 17, 18, 19, then this move to the US, both what was going on in the mind of a young Shiza, although sounds very mature for her age at 16, 17, what was going on in your mind in those years, and how did you feel when you landed in Stanford?
Yeah, I think 17, 18 was just a time of rebuilding, right? Sort of coming out through the grief and feeling deeply connected to making a difference in my community. I, worked in the camp for a year until it shut down. I organized my first protest when the victims of the earthquake were not seeing the support from the government that they had been promised to rebuild their homes. Learned the power of grassroots organizing, was living at the time through a military dictatorship, and so was really involved in marching and civil rights movements. And so those were my teenage years. I also happened to be not terrible at taking tests. So that meant I had good grades, and I hadn't really planned to go to the United States. Honestly, I think sometimes naivety can be your, I think being naive can be your strength. You don't know that what you're reaching for is difficult. And so you do it and you don't hold yourself back. So as I was applying to colleges, I planned to stay in Pakistan, but I thought, well, there's only really one school in Pakistan I want to go to. It was a liberal arts college. Right. I guess I should apply to some other schools, and literally Googled top 10 schools in the United States and applied to them, and, didn't really have a conception of how hard people work and how long they aspire to get into a school like Stanford. And so was lucky to be given a full scholarship to study at Stanford, and that was hard to turn down. So moved to America at the age of 18, and it was an interesting time. I think in like everything else in life, good and bad, it was definitely something that transformed my own possibilities. Yeah. I'd gone from being, this sort of girl without a ton of opportunities before me to being in the one of the most prestigious schools in the world, and having tremendous access to great professors, and being in the heart of Silicon Valley where everybody was building companies that were changing the world. Growing up, I had never really been exposed to startups. I'd really only thought you could make a difference by being in nonprofits or organizing in grassroots
Why do you think
ways.
That is? Why?
Well, it was just where I was raised. I was raised in Islamabad. It's not Silicon Valley, right? There aren't a lot of startups. There's not a startup ecosystem. There aren't women starting businesses. If there's businesses, it's old school industrial families. You don't, if you can't see it, you can't be it, right? And so I hadn't seen it. And then I moved to Silicon Valley and I saw it. And even in Silicon Valley, lots of disparity. There's, 2% of all venture capital goes to women. But even so, there were far more role models in business. And I thought, well, maybe I can build a business that does good in the world. And it doesn't just have to be through the lens of nonprofit. Yeah. And I think a lot of those ideas came to me for the first time at Stanford.
And so Shiza, you moved there, you're 18, you've gone to Stanford, and obviously there you're exposed to so many different walks of life, different people, maybe others who are also on a full scholarship from all around the world, and others who have probably had a very privileged background. Like, how was that for you? Because you've just over the last, your whole first 18 years, but in particular since being 14, you've been in the prisons, you've been supporting camps, you've gone through grief, you've seen so much happen. Did you ever have moments where you came across people and I'm like, they just don't understand the real world that we're living in? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah. I definitely had an unusual childhood. And so I think when I came to college in America, which was such a big opportunity, I saw it as a continuation of this path I'd been on. But of course, for my classmates, a lot of them, they were just excited to be out of their parents' homes and to go to their first frat party. And, my classmates are brilliant and doing, amazing things in the world, but their childhood had been different from mine for a lot of them, not all of them. But so it was definitely some culture shock. Not so much America, because I think American culture is so ubiquitous now, right? I grew up watching Friends. But being in an undergraduate college experience, especially a place like Stanford it's literally called a farm. It's not in a big city. When you're on campus, you're on campus. Yeah. And so I think parts of it were definitely lonely. But that's the thing about life, is it sort of takes you where you're meant to go. And so because I wasn't perhaps at all the parties and, you know, surrounded by 100 friends and having the most fabulous time, what I was doing instead was still trying to make a difference. And I would, you know, spend a lot of time researching what was going on back home. And as a result of that, when I was a sophomore at Stanford, I came upon a diary written by a schoolgirl in the Swat Valley about her experiences in the Swat Valley. And the Swat Valley is in the north of Pakistan, and it had been taken over in 2009 by the Taliban. They began to blow up girls' schools, and in January 2009 declared an all-out ban on female education in the Swat Valley. And I heard about the story, and I reached out.
And this was what happened on the 9th of October in 2012. Are we going towards now, which is what happened with the Taliban?
No, we're not there yet. No.
So this is even before that. So, okay, let's rewind. As you say, it's 2009. 2009. And you already reached out.
Yeah, so that summer. So when I read this little girl's diary, and she's writing under the pen name Gul Makai, but it was at the time an 11-year-old Malala, I reached out and said, I want to help. I want to help get your story out there. And that summer went back to Pakistan and organized a summer camp for her and other girls from her school to help get their stories out there and to help get them support to bring real change in their communities. I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore at Stanford. And, you know, going back to your original question of, you know, what was Stanford like? Because it was a little bit lonely for me, rather than immersing myself in college life, for better or worse, I was still trying to create an impact in the world. And because I was trying to do that, I was going home, I was organizing a summer camp, I was volunteering, I was trying to take the fact that I was now at Stanford and had all this access to professors and you know, media and the West. And I was trying to bridge those two worlds and help people in the West understand what was going on in my community and in my country and vice versa. Because all of that was happening, I would end up crossing paths with Malala when she was 11 years old. And several years later, when she was attacked by the Taliban, would end up quitting my job. I'd graduated from Stanford. I'd moved to Dubai to work at McKinsey. And I ended up quitting my job to return to America and co-found the Malala Fund and serve as founding CEO. So I think really, you know, looking back, and I often speak at colleges and universities, and I, you know, reassure students, it's okay, whatever your experience is. And if you're, you know, this is everything you wanted it to be and you're fitting in and you've made your best friends forever, you never want to leave, great, good for you. That's, you know, part of me wishes that was my experience too. But if you're lonely and you're not fitting in and you're not sure, you know, where your community is or what your direction is, that's also okay. And I feel like life will give us signs of what we're meant to be doing. And it's our job to pay attention to those. And there really isn't one path. Our paths will twist and turn. And if we can be open to where we're heading and the impact that we can make in those moments, then life will probably end up playing out much bigger than we could have hoped for.
But those signs, and I do want to come back to Malala, because I think it's a very important chapter and there's lots that we can all learn from what happened and still needs to change in the world. But I'm with you. You know, I know what you mean, these signs, understanding your path. You've got to be open to it and follow it and feel you're on the right path. But for people who are listening, they think, I don't really know what you mean, Shiza, of how do I be one more open and spot signs? What would we say to them? How could they be more open? What should they do? There's
a lot there, but maybe I'll say a couple of things. One is, I think a lot of us are taught that our path is linear, right? I'm going to study hard in school, and then I'm going to go to college, and I'm going to get a legal degree, and then I'm going to join a law firm, and then I'm going to climb the ladder, and then I'm going to become partner, and then I'm going to retire. And maybe when I retire, I'll have more time to give back. And I think the world that we live in today is a lot less linear, and that's okay. I grew up in Pakistan working in nonprofits. When I graduated, I took my first job out of college at a business consulting firm. I wanted to learn from the business world. I thought that I would stay at McKinsey for 3 years and then go to business school, and then I would build my own thing one day. But when Malala asked me to co-found the Malala Fund, I was 22 years old. I was a year out of college. I had no savings. And I had no idea if this would actually work. But I found it within me to have the courage to quit my job, move to New York with a suitcase, and start a nonprofit. And that had not been the plan, right? The plan had been to learn from the business world, to get a business school degree, to build my resume, to make sure that I was secure before I embarked on a journey to be an entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur. But I remember sort of sitting with a friend of mine at the time and talking about my fears in doing this. And he said, Shiza, what's the worst that can happen in this moment? And we talked about it. And I said, well, this could fail. People could not invest in this, not believe in our ideas, not think we were experienced enough. I mean, I was 22 years old. And he said, okay, let's say that happens. Then what? I was like, well, I guess I would still have my education, and I would still have family that, would maybe let me crash on the couch for a bit. Yeah. And I guess I would rebuild from there. I guess I would try again. And he said, well, that's not so bad, is it? And so I think, one way to think about it is fear. Coming back to what we were talking about is like, what fear is real and what fear is imagined? And do we put a lot into people's opinions and fear of failure and fear of what, not being what we should? Yeah. And how does that hold us back? And then secondly, do we believe that we deserve to have real meaning and purpose in our lives? I really do. I think that absence of purpose in our lives is crippling. Yeah. And we all deserve it. And it can come from our careers. It can come from our relationships. It can come from many different places.
I think just something on that I try to do, and I'm certainly not perfect, Shiza, is I have to take time for thinking, because I think thinking is so underrated, away from technology, just to kind of tune in. Yeah. It's like, is this living my purpose? Am I on the right path? What does the real deeper me actually feel? And I meet people constantly who they want to make a change, but they don't know what to do. But often they're not taking the time to just be. And I think we're human being, not a human doing, just taking the time to be. But I just go back there because I think it's important, Shiza, that Malala, we're talking about, of course, many people around the world will know Malala as Malala and Malala Yousafzai. But just to share, if you can, because I think it's important, what happened in 2012.
Yeah. So Malala is one of the most important voices in girls' education, I would say, in the world, and has advocated for girls' rights to go to school since she was 11 years old, at great personal harm and risk to herself. No child should ever have to do that. And for her bravery, for her advocacy, was shot by the Taliban at the age of 15. And miraculously came back stronger and decided to take that experience and rather than, just living her own life and saying, I've done enough, actually use that experience to inspire more people to act, to help ensure girls are safe, to help ensure girls around the world are getting an education, and to build a platform that enabled her to be even more impactful in that work. And so, I would say Malala's story, her courage is such an incredible example of what's possible in this world. Yeah.
And I think it's remarkable, obviously, you, Malala, and all the work that you've done around the world and continue to do, for female empowerment, girls' education, because there's still a long way to go, in my opinion. But Shiza, people again might be listening to this and thinking, wow, I admire Shiza. She put her head up, she made a difference against all the odds and the fear, fear even goes back to your earliest childhood memory of breaking that glass, right?
Yeah.
Do you still have a sense of fear when you speak to Malala? Because, sometimes we're speaking out against people who really disagree with our views. You were protesting on the streets at a young age. Do you feel fear? And how do you kind of combat that fear if it comes over you?
Yes, fear is an incredibly useful emotion, right? It keeps us safe. It helps us survive. Mm-hmm. So, and it will always be present in our lives. I think the work is not to vanquish fear. In fact, if you don't have it, I think that would be something to be more fearful of, because it is a response that keeps us safe. I think the work is to recognize fear, to understand what fear is real and what fear is imagined. Am I afraid because I'm actually going to be at risk of physical harm, right? That fear is protective, imminent physical harm. Or am I afraid of what people will think? Am I afraid of failure? Am I afraid of not being liked?
Yeah.
Am I afraid of not making as much money as I could, even though I'd be fine either way, right? Which fears are real and actually protective, and which fears are actually holding us back and imagined and exaggerated and societal. And then I think once we've separated those two, learning to move forward with fear, because fear will always be there. And it's not to say I don't have the capacity to feel this. It's to say I feel this and I choose to move forward and do it anyway.
It's so powerful. And I think, I'm very practical in my mind, and suddenly I'm thinking whenever I face a situation, I might even write down, what is it that I'm fearing? And almost those two columns, as you say, like what is rational and what is not. And I'm sure, as you say, the list will be completely different, and a lot of it is in our mind.
Yeah.
But the work that you've done has been fantastic. And I think a lot of people that I meet, and I'm sure you've met in your life, social entrepreneurs, people fighting for justice, they've often faced some form of adversity in their life. But then I meet people and I wonder, do you think that people have to face some form of adversity to step up and drive a change? And if not, what should people do if they're watching this and they're thinking, Shiz, again, I've not really gone through anything myself, but I would like a more purposeful life. I just don't know where to start.
I don't think anyone goes through this life unscathed. So I think suffering is inevitable. I think that is the nature of life. You may not experience it at the same age that I did, or you may experience it earlier. But I do think that learning to be resilient in the face of suffering and this idea of post-traumatic self-actualization, right?
How break that down for us a little bit as well, if people don't know much.
How people, you see people who go through something that they could never have imagined going through, and in the face of that, find a sense of purpose and meaning, and you're an incredible example of this, of taking tragedy, of taking suffering and using that to propel impact in the world and to ease the suffering of others, right? And I think meaning is essential to survival. And so when we grapple with something that feels existential or deeply painful, it is actually a natural response to try and create meaning and to try and make something horrible matter, right? To take it and say, I didn't choose this. I had no control over this, but I can choose to make something good come of this. Yeah. I think we do see this a lot. You saw it in your life. I saw it in mine. And it's not the only way to have impact and meaning, right? I think that over the last 10 years of my life, I have built meaning, and it hasn't just been a result of suffering or grief. It has also been a result of direction, right? Of understanding more and more my own strengths, my own gifts, what I need to be successful, what I bring to the world, what type of organization I want to build. I think when I was younger, it was simply showing up.
Yeah.
Something would happen and I would show up and I would say, what can I do? I'm here to help. And I think that's a great starting point. But now, you know, a decade and a half more into my career, I also know what strengths I can bring and what type of organizations I can build. And so it's marrying that sense of innate drive with experience and intellect and skills and superpowers, right?
It is. And I think, you know, on this show, we've had, you know, Ben Francis, who built Gymshark, and he spoke a lot about knowing his strengths at a young age. Jo Malone, she knows her superpower and her scent and her abilities. Do you think that do you take the time out to think, actually, what are my strengths and my superpowers and my gifts? You know, because I think people might be thinking, I go at 100 miles an hour. Do they just need to pause and just have a minute?
I feel like you're a lot better at this pausing thing than I am. And making lists. Honestly, I think it's useful to just ask people. You know, there's people who know you, who work with you, you know, ask them. I was just on a panel this week for Harper's Bazaar Women in Business, and my team was with me, and one of the questions was, you know, what is your leadership style? And I thought I knew the answer. But before I went up on stage, I asked my team just to confirm, and they told me what they thought it was, and I agreed with it. And so I think it's worth, you know, yes, look at yourself, but also other people can be a mirror and ask them, and that can be a really, really helpful thing.
Oh, I love it. There's so much there, and I think I love the practical side as well. I think people actually go and say, you know, what do people think of them? What's my gift? What's my superpower? And ask the question. And now going back to your life and your career, because you'd spent a lot of your teenage years, now into your 20s, really driving for social change. And as you shared there, meaning and purpose doesn't have to come from adversity. It can show up in all parts of your life. And in a minute, we're going to get into a statement that you've spoken about a lot, because you say, you know, companies who have a mission-driven and mission-focused are going to outperform those without. And so you got to a stage where I know you created your own company. And so just tell me a little bit about the organization, which I love, by the way, and I've spent so much time on the website in advance of this. Tell me about where that inspiration came from and all about the company.
You know, trillions are traded in the financial markets every day, and nonprofits are just a fraction of that. And my perspective is, if we are to solve the world's most pressing challenges, we need businesses, in addition to nonprofits, to be driven by a deeper sense of mission, to be more accountable to their impact on the environment, to their impact in the world. And I wanted to be a part of that change and build a business that was truly mission driven. I'm an immigrant. My partner's an immigrant. For both of us, we literally found our place in America by cooking food and having people come to our dinner table. We've always believed that food is at the heart of culture, of connection, of identity, of building a bigger table. And as we looked around us at the kitchenware industry, we realized there wasn't a brand that stood for that was rooted in inclusion, that was celebrating all of our cultures loudly and proudly. As we went deeper into the kitchenware industry, we just kept learning more and more about the challenges and the issues. For example, most of the industry is still using what are known as forever chemicals. The technical term is PFAS. These are the chemicals that make your pan nonstick. And they're terrible for human health. They're terrible for the environment. And we realized that there wasn't enough innovation in providing healthy, clean alternatives. So we wanted to create a non-toxic set of cookware that was healthy, that was sustainable, that was also beautiful, because beautiful objects are inspiring. And when you have a beautiful cookware set, you're more likely to cook, which is better for your health and better for the planet and better for your community to be cooking and gathering at home. And so we launched Our Place in late 2019, and the mission is all around building a bigger table. It's a brand rooted in culture and inclusion. We create beautiful, non-toxic, and sustainable products for the kitchen. That includes cookware and dinnerware and appliances and textiles and prep tools and more. And it really has become a brand that's known for for celebrating all of our cultures loudly and proudly.
I love it. And it's amazing. And, I see it. We're in London at the moment and I see it on the subway system here all the time now, which is great. But also I went on the website and I think so much of what you're doing, it's just so smart. So many of the products, and I urge everybody to go onto the website and have a look. I'm half Indian. So when you're making samosas or something at home, right, you've got the, where you fry and then you put it on the side and it just makes sense. So I absolutely love it. Now, aside from it being mission driven, I think what's really powerful is obviously within the first 18 months, you grew this to a 9-figure business. And that's around $100 million, if I'm doing my maths correctly here. How does that feel?
It feels humbling, I would say. Starting a business is really hard, and we worked on the first product for 2 years before we ever launched. We bootstrapped our savings. We got rejected by over 100 investors, and we had to get it off the ground and prove traction. And then, of course, once, we had done that, everybody was excited to invest and support. But the early days, nobody was really seeing the vision other than us. And we had to have that clarity of vision. We had to have that sense of resilience and determination and find a way to get it done. Yeah. And so it's been a really beautiful journey. And the wonderful thing is once we launched and people actually tried the products, then the business really started to grow because the products spoke for themselves and people would, order an always pan and then refer it to their friends, and we'd see incredible amounts of organic and direct sales and traffic. And the other thing that I've loved is people have really, shared how they feel seen by the brand. And as you said, we'll create a collection for Diwali or Nowruz or Shabbat or Ramzan. And, people will say, thank you so much for representing my culture, because we're not, I'll speak for myself as a Pakistani American now. I hadn't seen my culture represented by mainstream brands. And it means so much to see our cultures represented and to see ourselves represented. So we wanted to build a brand that centered culture and that, wasn't just celebrating one or two types of cuisines, only French food or only Italian food, delicious cuisines. I love French and Italian food, but Indian food and Mexican food and Pakistani food and Thai food, all of these cuisines are so deeply complex and they also should be celebrated in that same way.
I love it. I really do. And I really urge everybody to take a look, because I looked at your Always Pan. There's one that's like 8 in 1, another one that's 10 in 1, that Always Pan 2.0. Is that right? Yeah. Which I just think it's so good. And I had no idea about this whole non-stick and the health. And I don't think many people know about this, the health issues. So I love that you're combating that as well. And also, thanks for being open, because I think people can see it from the outside. Wow, scaling a business, do 9 figures. But they don't see under the iceberg, right, of all that hard work that's gone on. Yeah. There are lots of people who'll be watching this on board or at home who might be thinking, I'd love to start a brand. And I know Shiza saying it should be mission driven. If they were looking for like a few steps to get started, what might you say to them? Yeah,
I would say in terms of mission driven, really thinking about the impact you have every single day. As a business, you make so many decisions every single day. And there's big ones like how you build your supply chain and, whether you use forever chemicals or not. And there's small ones like, where do I order lunch from today? And can I maybe support a small, female founded restaurant that's just trying to get its name out there rather than, ordering from McDonald's again. And we get to make so many decisions every day in a business. And if you can build the foundation such that you're constantly making better choices, you will have a fundamentally better impact. Yeah. And yes, donating money is great and important. And we've donated over 2 million meals and counting. But it's also about embedding that impact in your business model, right? About the little things like we manufacture our glasses in the last place in Thailand that still hand blows glasses. Wow. And in the pandemic, our business was one of the main reasons that artisan collective was able to stay afloat. or the fact that we don't use plastics, and our packaging, we're constantly optimizing to make it smaller and smaller and tighter, because the tighter the packaging is, the less your carbon footprint, right? And so there's all of these decisions that we're making every day, and really just being thoughtful about those can make such a huge difference.
And it sounds as if you've constantly got, really you uphold high values and principles in all that you do, and I really admire that. When you're hiring and growing a team at such scale, how do you find the right people who uphold those values? It's really hard. When people are interviewing them, do the team uphold them? And how would you maintain that? Yeah,
well, thank you for the kind words, and no one's perfect, but, I do think we try very, very hard, and that's what we ask of ourselves, and that's what we ask of our team. And I think that, our place attracts someone who is more mission driven.
Okay.
You set that initial culture, you build that initial team. And if you do that in the right way, it'll attract the right people. Now, you're not always going to get it right. And, conventional business wisdom will say, hire slow and fire fast. So if you're wrong, then don't be afraid to make tough decisions. But, for example, our team today is predominantly female. And I never go to our recruiters and say, hire a woman. I say, hire the best person for the job. But because we are a female founded company, we have, we get a lot of incredible female talent that would rather come and work for us than go work for a company that isn't female founded. So it's actually that we are lucky in that we can now attract talent that's incredible because we have these values, we have this culture. Now, culture is a living, breathing thing. It's always a work in progress. And I tell our team, every decision you make, it'll either help our culture, hurt our culture, or not impact our culture. Try and make as many decisions as you can in the bucket of helping our culture. And that is as simple as, bringing joy and positivity into tough situations, having direct conversations when there's misunderstandings, being proactive and joining or organizing volunteer events. There's so much that you can do, and just consistently embodying that. And when things get weird, because they will, right? Humans are flawed, and we don't always communicate well, and we misunderstand each other, and, just being able to work through that in a productive way.
I think there's so much here, as you say, because being mission driven, it's not only good for business, but you're attracting the right people. So it's helping with talent attraction. But so many companies I feel we work with today, even, they might not be mission driven, or they like to think they are, but it just doesn't stick. It doesn't feel real. When you say that those who are mission driven are going to outperform those who are not, what would you say to companies who are they don't really have a strong mission? What should they do? Do they need to dig deep?
I think one of the things that I always talk to companies about is, how do you link your impact to your business model? So for a lot of companies, they just donate money, and that's important to do. Donating to good charities does make a difference. But I always talk to companies about, let's embed your purpose into your business model, right? And so I think I call it sort of Impact 2.0. With Impact 1.0, you had, businesses like Tom's Shoes. And what they would do is they would say, you buy a pair of shoes, we'll donate a pair of shoes. And that was impactful, and that, paved the way for businesses to be more mission driven. So I certainly don't think that I certainly don't say that wasn't the right thing to do. But I think the Impact 2.0 model that I think companies should be looking to now is actually, how do I not just donate money, but really think about how my business model can have a better impact in the world. So looking at your supply chain, looking at the materials you use, looking at your carbon footprint, looking at your culture, your hiring practices, looking at your marketing and advertising, right? For businesses like ours, you mentioned you've been seeing our ads on the tube. You reach so many people, every single day. What is your imagery saying, right?
Yeah.
Do you have an image of someone who is conventionally beautiful in the way that we've been taught by Western media? Or are you actually, as a beauty brand, putting out images of beauty that are more diverse, right? And even just that shift culture. So I think owning the responsibility that we have, right? Businesses say, well, I'm just providing a good or a service, but actually, no, you're shaping culture. You're providing jobs. They're either going to be good ones or bad ones. You're building a culture. It's either going to be compassionate or abusive, right? You're building a supply chain. It's either going to be extractive or it's going to be regenerative. And so really starting to look at the business holistically, I think it does require leadership to be bought in. And I would say that if businesses are able to start to be more and more mission oriented, they're more likely to be around in 50 years, right? Because people want meaning in their lives and they know that they deserve meaning in their lives. And they're not just going to show up. Talent is not just going to show up for a paycheck anymore. And if they are, then it's going to be very easy to outbid you and take your best talent, right? And so to me, it is something that is increasingly becoming non-negotiable for businesses to start to really look at their impact in the world and to make it better. And I don't think we're demanding perfection, but just progress.
It's powerful. And I think, as you say, we see talent now wanting purpose over paycheck. And I say that and I get a lot of interesting response. People say, is it one or the other? And it's a whole other conversation. But I think it's powerful. And it's practical there of an organization who looks at Impact 2.0. As you say, they think about their purpose, but don't just put it on your website. Don't just write it. How is it infusing into your marketing, your hiring, your culture, absolutely everything. So thank you. Now, on the show, before we go into your superpower shortly, which I'm so stuck between two because I do this to myself on the show and it's very, very difficult. It's a bit of a roller coaster. Now, I've got a few questions for you before I go into the quick fire round as well. But one of them is, I'm going to go deep again here, Shiza. Like, what's been the most difficult decision that you've had to make in your life? And how did you make it? I know that's a big question.
It's a big question. Well, I spoke earlier about choosing to quit my job at 22. I think, being in the United States, that's not something that I planned. So definitely, those of us listening who are immigrants, migrants, leaving home, leaving family, leaving your culture, it can be a beautiful and liberating thing. And it's also a painful thing, right? My parents live 7,000 miles across the world from me and I don't get to see them very often and they're growing older. And so I think that's definitely been hard. I think also just learning how to have an impact in the world. When I was growing up, I thought that I would be far more directly working in my home country, and because of several challenges that I faced, that became harder and harder. And learning that impact may not look exactly like you thought it would, but you can find your path and your purpose, and it can look very different from what you thought, but it can be even better and even bigger, and really accepting that and seeing that.
Powerful. And it really is, as you say, for immigrants and migrants. I'm sure there's people watching this right now who might even be on a flight as they make that transition. We hear from people all the time. It's difficult. It really, really is. Now, before we go into your superpower, though, I'm going to mix things up a little bit because I've got a few quick fire round questions for you. Okay. It's a little bit different now, and they're always different for most of our guests. So I've got 3 of them for you. The first one, Shiza, is, if you had to eat the same meal for the rest of your life, but you can cook it in an always pan, we'll let that happen. What are you cooking and why?
I'll be basic here. Probably some sort of bread.
Okay.
Olive oil. Wait, is this a meal? Eggs?
Okay, the meal's getting bigger and bigger.
It's bigger and bigger, yeah.
Okay. We're not going starters, main course. It's one course.
No cake. Or I'll stop. I would say, honestly, growing up and then moving to California, I love fresh ingredients. And so just being able to create simple food. let's go with a shakshuka. That's one dish.
Nice.
That's fair, right?
Love it.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, next one. What's the most, I suppose, random or adventurous thing that might be on your bucket list that we might not expect?
Scuba diving?
Oh, never tried it yet.
No, I had a friend
Yeah.
who said it was the closest we'd ever come in our lifetimes to being on another planet.
Wow.
And since then, it's really stuck with me.
Okay, love that. And I went for the first time actually in Thailand, and you mentioned where the artisans are. Beautiful place. Okay, and the final one. If I could give you an unlimited supply of one thing for the rest of your life, what would that thing be?
Courage.
Powerful. And I think it's particularly powerful because people might look at you and listen to this thinking, wow, she has everything together. And you've been really open, showing that it's not always the case. But to show that courage is powerful and we need it. It's difficult. Okay. Now, as you know, it's my job to work out what I believe your superpower is. And I'm not going to lie, we've done quite a few of these shows. And what I came onto this show this morning thinking might be the direction is there, but I'm actually going in a very different direction from getting to know you on this. So, okay, let me write this down because I can't multitask. Okay. Because this particular superpower, I feel like, one, it's a very important one. And in getting to know you in this conversation for the last hour or so, whilst you speak a lot about values and principles and doing the right thing, which is where I thought I was going to go, you know, and that's absolutely a superpower of yours. But I think there's something that's even more powerful, because whenever you're talking about doing the right thing, you touch upon the past, you talk about what you're doing now. But for me, you go forward and you talk about a difference in the world. And so I put it down here of just being a visionary. Because every time you're speaking, you keep looking ahead of the companies that we need, the people, women's rights, you know. And this vision to the future, I think it's endearing and it's powerful. And so I'd love to just ask you, what does that mean to you? And do you feel that is you? Do you have that vision for a better future for all of us?
That's, well, I'm humbled. And it is something I certainly aspire to be. You're very insightful. I don't know that one can call themselves a visionary, but when I asked my team this week what they thought my best leadership trait was or leadership skill, they said inspiration. So sort of similar, right? In being able to say, this is what we're working towards, this is what our vision is, and this is why we're fighting for this and why it's worth it. And I do think that sense of vision, of inspiration, of why, of purpose is essential to our beings, and it's essential to our happiness, and it is essential to building anything in the world.
Now, Shiza, I mentioned that a visionary, and you are so futuristic and inspiring in the way that you say things. But if people are listening, you say, I'd love to be a bit more of a visionary. I live in the past. What would we say to them? How could they do that, perhaps?
You know, when you asked me to draw my life graph, which has the highs and the lows, and there was a part of me that just wanted to draw it up. Not because I haven't been through lows, not because I believe life is always up, but because I do believe that if we can take the hard things we go through and use them to grow, then in fact, in the big picture, we're always moving forward. Like even in times when we're feeling heartbroken or when we're going through grief, we are still growing and we're still learning and we're still moving forward and upwards. And I sort of view life that way, is that we don't get to choose what happens to us. And in fact, you know, we're born, we will die. The people we love will die. And we have no control over so much, but we control how we react.
Absolutely. And
how we choose to live. And it is a privilege to be alive. It is a privilege to have the opportunities we have, right? Here we are in this beautiful room in London. Here I am having this conversation with you. What a privilege. I could never have imagined it. My my mother could never have imagined these opportunities. And so to not waste it, right? To make it count, to make it matter, that's, if we are going to be alive, let's choose to fill it with as much meaning as we possibly can and make the most of it.
Beautiful. And so powerful. And you are so right. And I hope people can take a lot away from this interview, because I've learned quite a lot. Now, I have a final question for you to close us out, because being a visionary that you are, I know you're very humble. What's your legacy, Shiza? What do you want people in the future to say, Shiza Shahid, this is what you were known for?
I don't know. I honestly think sometimes the pursuit of legacy can be a little egocentric. I think, it's in some ways nice to leave no trace, right? Leave no trace. Don't damage the land. Don't leave waste and litter. Let the land rejuvenate and heal, and let future generations build. But I think if I am to be remembered, I hope it is for love and kindness, that I was good to people, that I was kind, that I loved deeply and was loved deeply. I think those are the things we should aspire to be remembered for. And as long as there are people we love and showed love to and created love for here, we're remembered, and eventually we're not, and we make room for others to come and fill the planet with good.
Well, thank you. And that's a beautiful place to finish, which is on the topic of love, because I feel that the world we don't love enough, and everybody can end this episode by going and showing more love to what they do, who they are, and even I think self-love. Yeah. So thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing where things go with our place. I hope everybody checks out the website and gets that always pan that I'm definitely ordering. So no, thank you so much. I look forward to rooting you on, doing whatever I can in the future. Thanks, Shiza.
Thank you. This was lovely.
Also, a thank you to you, our listeners, for being part of this community. By watching, subscribing, liking, and also leaving comments on all the videos, it honestly really helps us to grow the show and to invite more incredible guests to join us in the future. Now, our plans are super exciting, and with your support, we can make this even bigger. And so if you do enjoy the show, please do hit the follow button on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening to the podcast. It really means so much to me and all of us at the Superpower podcast. And if you're watching us on board your in-flight entertainment, remember to follow us when you land, or maybe you've got Wi-Fi in the sky. For now, it's a huge thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Superpower podcast with me, Gyan Power.